Hello, let's have a look at the law and swords in the UK, and we can talk about some of the things you have to keep in mind if you want to own swords, if you want to buy swords, and some of the things you definitely can't do. Right, it's fairly simple. Keep them on private property, that's your house and your garden, or perhaps if you're lucky enough to own a lot more land, you might have more choice than that, and don't hit anybody with them. And that's really it. Thanks for watching. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that, but not a lot. We're fairly lucky at the moment. When I made my recent video about crossbows and the law, which I think is it's a more watched area. It's something that the police and government are more concerned about. But then they have actually made new legislation on swords, particularly with what's called ninja swords more recently. So I could be wrong in thinking they're focusing primarily on crossbows, but we'll see what happens. As I mentioned in my previous video, there's a lot of turmoil in British politics at the moment, and I think that's why they're not getting on with some things they might have liked to. In Britain at the moment, swords are legal to buy and own, with two exceptions I'm aware of, and I think they're the only exceptions. I've done a bit of searching for this. You're not allowed to have curved swords at all, and I think it's over 50 centimetres, so you can have a curved sword less than 50 centimetres. Well, it's not that I don't think you know how long 50 centimetres it is, but it's nice to see it right in front of you sometimes, especially compared to another sword. 50 centimetres is pretty short. I've seen a few swords, I think, on the Cold Steel website that are that short. Maybe they're hunting sword, but it's not curved, but I'm just talking about weapons in general that short. They're not that much use. I don't think that many people are interested in having them. Why curved swords? There is apparently a perception that they are more dangerous for cutting. There may be something in that, because for the length of the blade there is more cutting edge that will be in contact with armour or flesh. But I think it's just because politicians don't really know what they're doing, don't really know what they're talking about, and they hear samurai sword, they're the most dangerous in the world, they can cut through anything, and they believe it because they're poorly informed. I'm not really somebody who thinks that all politicians are stupid. Some politicians are stupid, but you have to have some capability. I don't know, I'm doubting my own words as I'm saying it, but I see MPs and I like to think that they're capable of something, but I don't know. I can't really argue their case very well at this point in time. Apart from curved swords that you cannot own, with exceptions I'll talk about in a minute, you can't own so-called ninja swords. I grew up and we knew them as the Ninja 2. I think that's completely a creation. The ninja sword is very probably an American movie creation, or perhaps Japanese movie creation. But Ninja 2, I don't see anyone even claiming that was a correct historical name for a straight-edged sword of that description. But that's what we saw them listed as in the back of martial arts magazines, and I used to look at, I think it was very short, a stainless steel weapon for about $30 from America, and at that point having things shipped internationally wasn't that common. If it was, maybe I would have got one, who knows. Anyway, you're not allowed to have ninja swords. The funny thing is there's no such thing as a ninja sword. It's completely fanciful, fictional weapon, wouldn't be any good to anybody. Yet that's the one they've chosen to ban. I don't want to argue with them. It does us lots of favours. If you want to collect swords, then the government have really helped us out, and there's not often I will compliment the Labour government. Not that I'm a particular fan of any alternative, it's not that, it's not a particular political matter. But when it comes to defining what they call ninja swords, it has to be, and this is most important as far as I'm concerned, between 12 inches long and 24 inches long. And that means that everything I own is completely exempt from it, and it's of no concern to me whatsoever. There's other things in the description. They call it the tanto type edge, where it's cut off like that. It's funny they call it tanto type, because they're assuming if you don't know what a ninja sword is supposed to look like, that you might know what a tanto looks like, and I think that's not very likely. They describe that as one angle less than 90 degrees, one more than 90 degrees. It's fairly specific. They then go on to talk about the size of a false edge and its percentage of the main edge, and I think it took me a while to understand it, because I thought they were talking about, sorry, not false edge, second cutting edge, and I thought they were talking about the back, which doesn't make sense with what we see depicted in ninja movies. But I think actually after reading a bit further, they think that this is a secondary cutting edge, and it's not, it's just a sharp jagged bit. I don't think they were ever supposed to be sharpened, although you do see that on these things that people call zombie knives that are so silly. Not just the design of them, they're just wall hangings, but zombie knives, oh, it's just so silly. The media is so silly. That's getting off of the point. Why curved and why ninja swords in particular? It's only because of perception. We could try to favour them and give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's because of the length, and obviously you're not going to take one of these and put it inside your jacket and sneak onto a train to cause mischief. You're not going to walk down the street with one concealed. Is it that easy to do it with a 24-inch sword with a 6-inch or more, probably more like 8-inch hilt anyway? I don't think it is. I think it really is just because of the word ninja and because curved blades are perceived to be samurai swords. If they weren't aware of what they will call samurai swords, then they wouldn't have concentrated on curved blades. They weren't doing it based on sabres, I'm quite sure of that, or scimitars. Another thing we can look at is the fact that people aren't going to search for things. You're not likely to search for a scimitar, a rapier, or a sabre if you're a thug who hangs out on the streets, planning on dealing drugs and robbery, whatever else you're getting up to. You probably won't have heard of those things. You certainly won't. They won't come to your mind if you think, I want to buy a sword to hit somebody with, but you will probably look for a ninja sword. Is that the media's fault? I think so, because they talk about samurai swords and ninja swords. I don't think they should. I think they should talk about Japanese swords. They should talk about katanas. They should describe the weapons. I don't think there's any need in our lexicon to consider there's such a thing as a ninja sword, a ninja weapon, a samurai weapon. But people are lazy, and the media is full of journalists who don't give a damn about accuracy or the truth. They want to sensationalise everything. What do they want to say? Do they want to say that a man near a train station was attacked with a curved Japanese sword? No, it was a samurai sword, because it conjures up images of something that's not really there. So I don't think there's any justification. The only thing you can do is you can say perhaps it's because larger weapons are harder to conceal and you're less likely to surprise someone with them or carry it into a public space. When I talked about the law with crossbows, I mentioned the fact that 2 short pieces of wood joined together with a chain is absolutely illegal. You can't buy them, you can't own them. Yet this is legal. As usual, I don't want to give anyone any ideas. Not that I'm suggesting there's a lot of MPs or police watching my videos, but I don't want to give them ideas. I don't want to say you should do something about this. But this is far, far more dangerous than a pair of nunchaku, as I know them. Far, far more dangerous. It's more dangerous than a sword under most circumstances. It depends on the situation, depends on where you were on the battlefield, what your place was, because of course, if you had this and you were surrounded by a number of swordsmen, you might be in trouble. I have seen some people put videos with tests on where you have 2 swordsmen and 1 spearman, and the spearman comes up pretty well. But the role of a spear usually on the battlefield is that you're in a formation and you're acting in unison with people around you who are suitably armed for whatever role they have. But when you think about it, it really is, it's crazy, and it's hard to justify the fact that a sword just as long as this, you may not buy it, you may not own it. And I think their perception is that it's more dangerous. Yet you can buy and own this and there's no questions asked. This is carbon steel. This is from Get Dressed for Battle. Not sure who makes it. They don't make it that clear on their website. And actually I bought it with Al-Shaf, and this is a pretty cheap 6-foot bow staff made out of beech. So it's a good wood, good quality. Haven't quite finished mounting it. That's why there's still tape at the end of it to protect the paint. Getting off the subject again, but it is crazy that one thing's legal and another thing's not. And of course, unless you are under suitable age, or perhaps if you turned up really looking shifty, you might have a problem. But you can buy a chainsaw, and I say turning up looking shifty, but a lot of the time you can buy them from stores where they might not even know what you're buying. It's not as if there's careful checks on things like this. You might have more trouble buying a kitchen knife depending on where you are. I don't think there's a very good reason for it. I'm very glad, I'm actually ecstatic. When I first read the suggested description of what they're going to call a ninja sword, I was quite pleased about it. And then I do have a couple of notes. It was in March 2025. They produced a document that's a response to the consultation, and it verifies this, and I was really happy because it doesn't mess with anything I want to collect. I'm not interested in Japanese weapons, would have been when I was younger. Did look at some katanas a few years ago when I started collecting swords, and I'm not completely ignorant when it comes to weaponry, but I thought they were a little bit longer than they are, and it put me off a bit, and now I'm glad I didn't, because I'd have to get rid of it. You have no choice. I recently spoke to a friend when I was out who has a father who lives in Cornwall, and he collects katanas, and I said to him, did you not know you're not allowed to have them under any circumstances? He thinks that the Cornish police are fine and he won't have any problem there, but we'll see. This is the thing with sword law. It gets onto this point. It really is the police you want to worry about, and other people in the legal system. I'm not saying that police are all have bad intentions towards you, but some of them do. I've known a lot of police officers. I know some ex-police officers. Some of them were quite good friends of mine. Some of them might have left the force because it's not what it used to be. But you're dealing with the police, and you might know, Matt Easton made a video about this that recently, can't remember which police force it was, but they took some 40 or 50 weapons, all of which were antiques, none of which were illegal. Not only did they seize them, but they boasted about it on their website as if they had done something good, as if they were protecting the public. I've tried to think what could have happened. The only conceivable thing is that they were on a property that is now owned by somebody else, perhaps somebody who had a party and there were drunken people messing around with these blades out in the open. Other than that, there was no reason to suspect them or to condemn them or to take these weapons away. So unless something we don't know about happened, the police acted incorrectly there, and they will act incorrectly. I'm well aware of the fact that there could be a point when some police arrive at my door and say, we've seen you, we've heard you've been seen with swords, we want to talk to you about it. I'm very happy for that to happen. I would try to explain to them how I use them in areas where there's no people around and that there are a lot of things to consider for safety. Legally, they've got no right, no good reason to question me. Doesn't mean they won't. And I would be very welcoming and explain the situation to them. But here's the thing, this is something to remember. I would film it as much as possible. And if I was talking to a police officer about a weapon, you don't go and say, and have a look at this one. You say, are you happy for me to take this out? Right, I'm just going to show you, just if they wanted to see you don't have curved swords, you don't have ninja swords and such things. But I think it would be a good opportunity, little off subject, to show them that collectors of weaponry like that, we don't have bad intent and we are very careful people. But you can't trust the police to know what the law is, and you cannot necessarily trust them to apply it correctly. And even when it comes down to being in a court, a lot of the time it's arguing one side against the other. And I don't have confidence that it's infallible by any means at all. Here's a good time to look at the exceptions for curved swords and what they call ninja swords. There are more details to it, but essentially, if you're using it for sporting purposes, it's allowed. If you're using it for filmmaking, religious purposes, then you are supposed to be exempt. I believe that a couple of years ago I looked at the official document. It's not a law document about curved swords, it's about offensive weapons. I can't remember the exact title, but if you look in the description for this, you'll find some links. I'm sure it listed martial arts there, and that has changed and now it just says sports. Here's a problem that's quite complex. How do you prove that your weapons are for sporting purposes? I think it's quite easily done if you practice sports with them. They will say, and credit to Matt Easton here, he said that you should try to have public liability insurance if you're not part of a club. And it's always good to be safe, and I believe him, but I don't think it should be the case. And here's the real complexity. They would say to me, but you're at home, you're not practicing with other people, so therefore we don't count it as a sport. Well, it's clearly a sport. I'm trying to train into how to use weapons correctly based on HEMA documentation, and I sometimes do it with other people. I don't go to a club because there's not one close by. There is one fairly nearby that they focus on Viking weaponry and Viking period, and that's not quite of interest to me, but that's irregular anyway. There's nowhere nearby that I can do that sort of thing. There was actually a backswording society not far at one point, but that's long gone now. So here's my argument to them. There isn't a club that I can join, so I have to do it at home. And here's the most important part, and this I think is quite correct, but you try getting it to stand up in the court of law, won't count on your chances. If I had a so-called ninja sword that you're not supposed to have, but you can for sporting purposes, and it was sharp, then they would say, oh, but it's not sporting purposes because you're not doing it with other people. Well, you can't do anything with a sharp weapon with other people anyway, ever. The only thing you can do with a sharp weapon that's sporting of any sort is cutting. And that's as valid if it's you using a stand in your back garden or as part of a club. Are there clubs that do it in Britain? Not sure there's clubs that do it sometimes, but I don't think there's any clubs for cutting as a sport. People call it test cutting, I just call it cutting most of the time. But it would be completely correct. Everything that I do with a sword, I don't have any illegal swords. I am fortunate in that. If I did, I'd have to get rid of them now. I don't have any, but if I did, then I would have the defence of them being for sporting purposes, martial arts. Would it count doing videos like this to say they're for videos? Again, this is the problem with not just British law, but some law. It all depends on who's arguing for you, how good they are at doing it, and how good their opposition is. I know there's nothing I do wrong with them, but trying to prove it, that's a difficult thing. And you're not always going to be lucky in that. And it can depend, just as well as the people arguing from both sides, it could depend on the judge or magistrate as well. So you have got to be careful. It's a good idea to have a record of things. For example, just one quick example, if you were to have the police talk to you about swords, you might say to them that I'll take them out like this if I've got somebody within 5 feet of me and we'll look at them. But if we're going to start moving it around, then I'll only do it if they're 10 foot away. And if we're going to start swinging them, then we have a rule that we abide by, where you've got to be 20 foot or more away. Things like that might just make them realise that you are taking it seriously. I like to think that if you had some officers, they might even take an interest, but who knows? It's variable, and you don't have to go far to see videos of British police officers behaving in a way that's not very fair, not very reasonable, and not necessarily very considerate. One addition to the exceptions, and I was wrong about this, is that you're also allowed to have those weapons that you shouldn't otherwise have if they are traditionally made or they're antiques. And I thought traditionally made meant it had to be largely assembled by hand. But again, back to Matt Easton, not trying to steal information that he presented, he has said on his website that actually most count as traditionally made. Try getting the police to understand this. Good luck. In fact, you would have to go out of your way to buy a sword that isn't traditionally made, because Hanway, LK Chen, Windlass, most of my weapons, not most, but more than half of them are actually by Windlass. Just by chance, really. It wasn't deliberate, but they're perfectly good. And therefore, you're not likely, unless you go and buy something that costs £50 from some silly shop somewhere, and it was just really meant for display or to go on your wall and happens to be sharp anyway, probably made out of stainless steel, then you won't have a weapon that's actually illegal to own in Britain. Try getting them to understand that. Don't know how good your chances will be. Talk about exceptions. Now, in March 2025, we had the Ninja Sword, the document based on the consultation, and it's poor, it's very poor. I'm not just blaming the current government for this. I know that it's not popular to care about language or anything like that, but they basically say, we don't care. If it results in less swords being on the street, then it's all good. Here's a pedantism, but it should be fewer swords. I would not normally make that correction, but the point is, these are highly paid people, quite highly paid civil servants, probably highly paid, and they're supposed to be professional, and they probably had a lot of people to look at this document before it was produced, before it was published, and they couldn't get that together. And it's a revision as well, and that just summarises the competence and apathy of modern politicians for me and the British political system. I just don't think the system we have at the moment encourages people who care very much or who are very dedicated to good things to enter into politics. I'll put the link in the description for the video to the document that came from that consultation. Have a look at it if you're interested in swords. It shows you what the future might hold, because some people responded to it. Only 312 respondents, which surprised me a little bit. Yes, considering the scale of it, but then I suppose it shows that people are focusing on other things, and that's also why the government haven't pushed through more changes. 312 people. There were a few of them saying, well, swords shouldn't be owned at all under any circumstances. If you're going to go down that path, then there's lots of things that should be banned, and I do understand you've got the difference between things that are tools and things that are primarily weapons, but they're not only weapons. There's a lot of things you can do with a sword, even just hanging it on the wall. But a lot of people enjoy having swords. They enjoy practicing with them, understanding how to use them, understanding how they're made, even just looking after them. And if you are going to ban everything that's dangerous, there might be things higher up the list. Now, people say, well, if you ban cars, you can't get to work. I think banning cars would be absolutely absurd. But you can't necessarily say that they are something you need, that you cannot do without, because then we've got public transport. Again, don't give the government any ideas. Let's see where things are in 20 years' time. The document is interesting, though, and there are a lot of people calling for things like this to be banned altogether. Let's hope their voice doesn't override all the other voices who say swords are perfectly safe. They're for enthusiasts, and the people who are out there committing crime, they aren't buying swords from even cold steel. They're not buying them from the night shop. One, because they're too expensive. Two, they've not heard of the kind of weapons to look at, and they probably don't want to own something like that. They probably just want to own a ninja sword, and they don't care whether it's authentic or not. Some of the responses were idiotic, as I've mentioned. The document's very poor. Some people responded. They were obviously fairly extreme in their views, I think, and they just want to blame. It gets complex. We could go into America. You know, people say, well, guns don't kill people. People kill people. It is the same with swords. It's a true principle. I've mentioned this before. I've owned weapons for 40 years, and I've never hurt anyone with one. Never cut anyone. Had one minor accident where I sliced a finger a little bit. That's it. They can be perfectly safe, and most people who want them to be perfectly safe with them are enthusiasts who are interested in them. Overall, is it a good thing that they have banned ninja swords then? What they call ninja swords? It's not a bad thing for somebody like me, but I don't think it achieves anything. I don't think it's going to change anything. I'd be more for very, very harsh sentences for anybody found carrying a knife without good reason. So they're not at work, they're not fishing, they're not going camping or something like that. I mean, why am I even saying it like that? You know, if you've got somebody with a hooded top hanging around on the street corner, he's got a knife with him, you know that there's a problem there. I don't often mention this. I've been stabbed. I will tell the tale of that. It's not very interesting, certainly no tale of glory and heroism, but I was stabbed once by a kid. You wouldn't have suspected anything. It was on a bus on the way home. He was under 18. I know what it's like, and certainly had no idea that was happening until after it happened. I think that's everything to say about it. Even on your own property, of course, there are things you can't do with swords, and this is another thing. Somebody recently asked me in response to one of my other videos, do I know the difference between illegal and unlawful? Actually, I don't. It's really getting dark. I'll be as fast as I can. I don't, strictly, but from what I've looked up, there's not an explicit difference. It's really just linguistic, and people tend to talk about things being unlawful if they're talking about violations of the letter of the law, especially when it comes to politicians. They don't like to say it's illegal what you did or what you've done until there's evidence of that and until it's gone through the court. But I'm not quite sure what point they were trying to make, but the thing is, it is a very complex matter, British law. I don't have a lot of confidence in people employed in that field. I do know some. It really is a case of what you can argue and what you can't argue, and it doesn't tell you specifically there's not a list of 10 things you can do these with a sword and here's 10 things you can't do with a sword. So you're allowed to have a sword on your own property in your back garden, but that's not the end of it. If you do something stupid with it, you'll be in a lot of trouble. It's not quite as complex as with crossbows, where if a bolt goes over the fence, that's it, you're in trouble. But we're pretty lucky at the moment. How long that will last, I do not know. I do have fears. That's what started me talking about this. When I first mentioned that I think crossbows will be banned soon. I think things are going to become worse for people who are enthusiasts of various kinds of weaponry. but we'll see. I really think that's it. So again, back to my summary at the start, keep them on private property, don't hit anybody with them. And that is the essence of it. And it's dark now, so let's finish off. My name's Mark, thanks for watching this. Time constraints have kept me from making many videos, got lots I want to make, so there'll probably be many more soon. Thanks for watching, see you next time, cheers.